Hello again. How's it going, everybody? I hope things are going well. I'm getting a lot of texts and calls and a couple of emails. I could use a hand from you guys. If you would take a look, I've got ITS working with me for my ethics section. I uploaded all the materials that I've handed out to that class as well as to you guys. I uploaded them on Brightspace, and apparently there's no way to access them. ITS keeps telling me that they are there, but if you guys would take a look, that'd be great. If they're not showing up, I just need to know that. And instead of using that useless piece of technology we call Brightspace, I'll just email all the files to you. All right. I apologize for looking a little bit haggard this morning. Just had a rough night, not really sleeping, kind of worried about some things, and yeah, as we all are. But I wanted to make sure this video got out early so that you can get a jump on meeting number 4. All right. So, wait, let me hold on one second. Oh, thanks. Sorry about that. I'm going to send this out in 2 sections. So there'll be, meeting for number 1 and meeting for number 2. It still is the case that it takes a very long time for it to upload when it's longer than 30 minutes, but 45 seems to be okay. So I'm going to do 45 and 45 and we'll be good. All right? Awesome. Later today also, I'm going to do an instructional video concerning how to take the quiz. I might get to that today. If I don't, it'll be right away tomorrow morning. All right, awesome. So meeting number 4. Why is my screen doing this? Okay. We're finishing out thinking and moral considerations. I'm also going to talk a little bit about 2 quotes in Personal Responsibility Under Dictatorship that directly define what judgment is not. So the big key element that we get today is judgment. All right. Again, remembering what Thinker Quiz Review Sheet number 3 says, Arendt has a very specific approach. She wants you as the reader to be doing the very activity that she's talking about, thinking and setting your own self-set limits and judging for yourself. So to that end, there are some terms she never defines, one of which is judgment. Even in the 3rd whole book of The Life of the Mind that she was writing when she died, she was never out and out defining judgment, saying judgment is this. You see, that would give you a rule that you could just sort of slap onto any sort of an event and do that rather unconsciously. Sorry, my book's falling. Rather unconsciously. And think about proposition number 2. Remember, she had 3 propositions in thinking and moral considerations. The first is that thinking has to be ascribed to everyone. Everybody has the ability to think as long as they're sane. And the third is that thinking takes you out of the world of appearances. It really removes you from the interpersonal and takes you into the intrapersonal, where you're talking with yourself. Okay? Oh, one second. Oh boy, hopefully my voice holds out. All right. But the second one, and I would say in a lot of ways, the most important one, which is really central to understanding what her whole overall argument is. The second one is that thinking is not going to result in a set of rules or a code of conduct. I don't somehow, through the process of thinking, arrive at my set of values, and then I have them forever and always to slap labels onto whatever situation I come across in all my days, as though I don't need to think about those things again. Yesterday is not today, okay? Yesterday had its own issues. Tomorrow will have its own issues, and things can significantly change. If I arrive at my set of values or code of conduct, even if I've done that really for myself through thinking, and then don't think again, that's, I mean, that's so strange, isn't it? Think about thinking, reflect on it for a moment. Okay, let's look at 160 for a second. The habit of examining and reflecting on whatever comes to pass, regardless of specific content and quite independent of result. Okay, so let's have that habit and look at what the thinking activity is again, as we have been. This should be our habit. Let's think about it again. This is why she has the definition of thinking in there so many times. So, in looking at that definition of thinking, specifically that one, let's examine what it is that we're examining. What is it that brings thinking up as an activity? Okay? It's whatever is going on in front of me that catches my attention, that makes me stop and start examining this. I pull away from whatever external situation I'm in, and I'm now in my mind and I'm chit-chatting this through with myself. And relative to this particular circumstance, I say, wow, I can't do that. Oh, wow, that would just be awful. If I did something like that, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Now, again, I might not have to make a choice here at all. I could just be looking at something. Um, I'm trying to just pick a movie, any movie, where there's a dramatic moment, where there's a betrayal or a lie being told in some way. And you look at that and you go, I don't think I'd be able to do that. That's just so wrong. Okay? Literally, that's a fantasy situation. That's not, you're not going to be in that situation. Okay, we're probably watching, all of us, a lot of Netflix and a lot of Amazon and whatnot. Hey, if you're watching some of the James Bond movies, you could say to yourself, I don't think I could ever do that. Especially that one where he's doing a whole lot of parkour. I've fallen down the stairs twice now. This is not good. I definitely can't do that. And that has to do with physical limitations, but I also just wouldn't chase somebody down because it just didn't seem right. Anyway, neither here nor there, but you see some sort of a situation like that and it runs through your head. I don't think I could do that. If I did something like that, I wouldn't be able to live well or in peace with myself. And as you're chit-chatting that through, you can say, wow, this is like that other time, or it's like this other thing. And wow, if I ever were in that situation, I think I'd do this. Those are expectations. All of that does set your self-set limits, but none of it breaches the threshold of judging. And none of it remains after the thinking activity is over. Okay, when I'm done looking like this, and thinking about something, I come back and talk with another person and I rejoin the world of appearances. And my thinking, the two in one, just becomes the one again. And I'm out here doing stuff. If what I was thinking about has no connection to anything that I need to do right now, well, then those self-set limits, which I arrive at through the thinking activity, don't pan out. Let me rephrase that. They don't come into use in judgment, which is going to be our focus for today. So, if I'm in the habit of examining and reflecting, that's what the examination and the reflection is. But overall, I have to keep saying, with whom am I doing this? Why do I consciously want to keep coming back to this relationship? I know I make a comparison between the internal relationship and the external relationships that we have with other people, but it's valid. Imagine being in a relationship, sorry, with your significant other or with your best friend, and you never spend any time with them. You never text, you never talk on the phone, you never FaceTime, you never share a funny meme or something silly. You have nothing to do with each other. How can you really say that that's a relationship? How can that be of any significance for you? Or if you say, that's I can say this, I don't know if it was in talking with you guys or with another class, but there were three of us who were just really absolute best friends when I was at LMU. And it was me and Katie and Shelly. And we were all philosophy majors and we hung out 7 days a week. And, if Katie was at work, we just headed over there. If I was at work, everybody headed over there. Shelly didn't work, whatever. Truth is, Katie and I are still best friends 25 years later. And I see her and talk to her quite a bit. I haven't talked to Shelly in I think about 15 years. I saw her a couple years after I moved home here to California. And great, our class reunion is coming up in September. And if I see her, that would be absolutely wonderful. But I really can't say that we're close friends. We could be again if she's back in LA, that'd be awesome. But if we spend no time together, now take that out of the external, put it in the internal. If I thought a matter through once a long time ago and believe that I never have to think on it again, that's really just kind of saying that I don't have to revisit the relationship I have with myself in that area. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let's keep going. All right, so we are on page 146. The quest for meaning on page 177 and 179. That's going to be pretty important for reflecting on what Arendt means by truth. We saw back in some questions of moral philosophy, in her mention of Socrates as the paradigm example of being a thinker. If you revisit some questions of moral philosophy really quickly, page 107 and then 111, because they're directly related to what we're about to talk about and Socrates' third proposition that Arendt brings in. Please always, for the quiz, keep in mind there are the Socratic propositions that she brings in from him and her three propositions from Thinking in Moral Considerations. Awesome. Okay, and always keep Socrates and Arendt distinct. Socrates is just a little bit more positive about everybody desiring to be a thinker than Arendt is. Okay, awesome. If you take a look then at 107, it's talking about Socrates' speech of defense. He was convicted, basically, of treason, if you want to be honest. He was convicted of treason, and before sentencing, the 501 person jury of Athens gave him an option. If he would just stop doing philosophy, if he would just stop talking about it, if he would just stop thinking, they would set aside the conviction. He could live out the rest of his days with his horrible wife, Xantippe. She was a horrible human, and his kids and whatever. And his response to that up at the top is really important. He said, they said, we will let you go on the condition that you give up this investigation of yours in philosophy. And in response to that, the answer will always be the Socratic answer. I hold you in the highest regard and affection, but as long as I have breath and strength, I will not give up philosophy, and I shall not change my way of life. What that connects to over on 111 is the issue of truth. We looked at truth in an objective way in both Plato and Augustine, and obviously Socrates means truth in a very objective way. Arendt does not. Here she's talking about truth in an objective way, but it also highlights the nature of the subjective truth she's going to be talking about, the meaning that I want you to pull out here from 177 and 179. But take a look a little bit above the middle. We talked about it before. She says, there comes a point where all objective standards, truth, rewards and punishments in an afterlife, etc., yield precedence to the subjective criterion that the kind of of the kind of person I wish to be and live together with. Okay, so there can be these objective statements that this is what ought to be the case. and that this is necessarily so. But at some point, it has to stop and be the subjective perspective that says, okay, that may be what all of you are collectively saying, and what has been asserted objectively. But at some point, when I'm choosing, I have to say, this is who I want to be, and the relationship that I want to be able to maintain. That's the subjective truth that is immediately self evident to all thinkers, but is also what isn't open if I'm not a thinker. So taking a look at 177 and 179, whoops, provided I kept my pages in order. Remember, I got my book binder clipped together. At 177, we get a reflection on the quest for meaning. She is talking about a couple of things. The quest for meaning, which relentlessly dissolves and examines anew, dissolves and examines anew all accepted doctrines and rules, can at every moment turn against itself, as it were, produce a reversal of the old values and declare these as new values. Could be that something yesterday I would never do, given the circumstances that I'm now thinking about today. I'm like, yup, doing that. Because I'm thinking about it. My self-set limit for the particular situation has now changed. Okay? And looking over at 79, she gives the third Socratic proposition. The third Socratic proposition, as you can see on your Arendt terms that I sent that file to you, is that the unexamined life is not worth living. Okay? And she says, if the unexamined life is not worth living, then thinking accompanies living when it concerns itself with such concepts as justice, happiness, temperance, pleasure, with words for invisible things which language has offered us to express the meaning of whatever happens in life and occurs to us while we are alive. So a couple of things. First of all, the unexamined life is not worth living, and we're going to come back again to revisit the Socratic propositions as self-evident for a thinker, but almost unintelligible if I'm not a thinker. They're almost some sort of nonsense that philosophers throw out there to sound special. Okay? But here's the thing, thinking accompanies living. Thinking is what I'm doing when I'm being fully alive. I could think about those special concepts, temperance, justice, virtue, excellent living, eudaimonia, happiness, whatever. I could think about those as special topics, but I could also think about the meaning of whatever happens and whatever concerns me. But if I don't, then it doesn't have meaning. And that's why our very next sentence is the quest for meaning. Socrates called it eros. Remember back at 490A through B, where we talked about in The Republic in Book 6 about the erotic desire for truth? That's the eros part of it. What Arendt is going to keep from Socrates, but she's not going to have it be aletheia truth. She's going to have it be what I discover in thinking and maintaining that relationship with myself. All right? So keep that in mind. Now, going back to the Socratic propositions, which we'll revisit in just a moment as well, think about for whom they are valid. Okay? They're only valid for me if I'm a thinker. If I'm a non-thinker, I just don't believe it. It doesn't make sense. Look at those three propositions. It is better for me to be at odds with the whole world than being one, be at odds with myself. Okay, if I am not a thinker and I don't know this thinking activity and I don't see the importance or benefit that it has for me, then I would really be appalled at the idea that you would suggest that I be at odds with everyone. I mean, my gosh, why am I so special that I could just, ignore what everybody else is saying? If I'm not a thinker, then that makes sense. Okay? I would rather suffer harm than do wrong. Okay, I can say that as a thinker because I know the definition of wrong. And if I'm not a thinker, my definition of wrong is just doing what the group deems unacceptable, what would damage my relationship with the group. I don't have this relationship with myself to worry about. So wait a second, you're going to hurt me? I'm hurt either way. I might as well at least avoid doing what the group dislikes. Now this third one, an unexamined life is not worth living. Any of us say that as a thinker, and we're like, of course, if I had to stop doing the thinking activity, like I drew your attention to in page 107, if I had to stop doing the thinking activity like Socrates was asked to do, I just can't do that. It's not worth it to me to live a life that's devoid of meaning. It isn't. Now, that doesn't mean that anybody else can deny my human rights and say that I don't have protections under the law, that it's okay to just off me or something like that. But my life just loses all of its uniqueness, all of its separate value and importantness. Importance, that's the word I'm looking for. Sorry. Okay. But look at that statement from the outside. An unexamined life is not worth living. Well, just because you think that it's not worth living, that doesn't mean that you can suddenly run around and decide who's good and who's bad. Isn't that where like racism and genocide come from? Okay, I'm saying that snotty so that you can kind of hear that. If I'm not a thinker, my only focus is on what everybody around me is doing and glomming onto what the group values, then that idea that an unexamined life is not worth living, how dare you? It's an affront to the value of human life. Every life is valuable. Yes, it is. So why would I waste it in not thinking? Why would I not search for the subjective truth of wanting to be able to live with myself? Being able to set limits for myself and therefore judge for myself. Ha ha! All right, moving right along. On the past thinking issue, that's what I wanted to bring all this up to discuss. If you look at question number 2, it's very important. It's one of the, I should have noted the number, sorry about that. Under question 5, A, thank you. Question number 5A on the Thinker Quiz Review Sheet answers. The question is, do I personally compose a set of values or a moral code? The answer is no, I don't. Self-set limits pertain to this situation. Then the situation etch-a-sketches and I'm back to nothing when I think again. I still have my memory of the limit I set, and I might be shocked at how remarkably naive I was, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought that was my limit. But I never went into action, so it didn't really impact anything, and it was based on thinking, so I can still maintain the relationship with myself, even though my limits may change. That's it. Going forward, sorry, I did take allergy meds, I just sound terrible. Going back to question number 2. If I composed a set of limits and my thinking resulted in me having a moral code that made further thinking on these types of issues unnecessary, then why isn't that just as unconscious, just as unaware, and just as asleep as if I'm just slapping labels on things like and categorizing good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable as the group does? See? All right. So that's it. All right. What is it that is dangerous about thinking? This is question 3. Don't really worry about this all that much, and just it's just a reading question. It's the idea that the second someone says, this is what you should do. Hey, we all think this is a good idea. And you go, oh, well, if everybody thinks it, it must not be good. I'll just, negate that and say no. That's not thinking. Okay, that's glomming on and holding fast to the norm that's given just as much as if you were adhering to it. And automatically, sort of instantly negating it is just as unthinking. All right. Shielding people against the dangers of examination. And I kind of have always wondered about this. I don't know so much if there's somebody else out there trying to keep me from thinking or shield me from the dangers of examination. I kind of think that there is a real major push in our society that busyness, being busy, do, have a tangible product, let's go, let's go, let's go, is all very much running roughshod over thinking. And the idea that you would sit in quiet solitude for a few minutes, sorting out your thoughts, and have that be looked at as valuable. I mean, maybe this is a situation you're hitting. I mean, perhaps your family is at home or they're working from home and they've got meetings and conferences and whatnot, and you take a moment to sit and you're just sort of reflecting. I can easily imagine my own folks if this was my situation and well, I didn't live at home, but I wouldn't have been able to go home. But if I would have been with my parents, or what are you doing? You're sitting there, you're staring off into space, you have classes to do, there's exams, there's papers. Why are we sending you to college if you're not working, 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 working? I hope that's not the case. I hope you have understanding folks who are being supportive. And actually, even if they're advocating that, they're probably being supportive. Yay, mom, yay, dad. But sometimes sitting and looking like this is very productive because you're talking a matter through with yourself. You just kind of look out of it while you're doing it. Okay, just because it doesn't immediately have a tangible product doesn't mean it is of no worth. So I think where we are just, go, 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 just follow the instructions, just do what it says, just knock it out, just get this done, go, go, go. Okay, that's holding fast to a moral norm. Just do it in whatever way is said and then just move on. Well, maybe not. Still think about the nature of your assignments, why you're doing it, should you be doing it. I always bring it up. You know what I'm going to say. It's that line from Jurassic Park. The scientists were so busy trying to figure out if they could, they never asked if they. Exactly. All right. So I still have to remember the name of that actor, the tall guy, whatever. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it, you got time. You can watch it on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix. All right. So anyway, great thing that's going on in question number 4. Love question number 4 because it gets to that idea of holding fast. Holding fast to something, I talked about in our last video, is just really just grabbing onto it. And as long as you have something to grab onto, whatever it is fine. Okay? Except that's not okay. What are you grabbing onto? Okay? So just keep that in mind. I'm not randomly grabbing onto things when I am working at maintaining the relationship that I have with myself. I'm carefully examining and reflecting so that I know what I'm adhering to, what I am holding myself accountable for, and why. Awesome. Okay, subsume. Subsume is a very important word in connection to understanding what judgment is not. To subsume is to place something under a heading, a category, or something else. Okay, so I could ask you, are these earrings? Yeah, they fit in the category of earrings. Am I wearing a sweater? Yes, I'm wearing a sweater. Do I have plants behind me? Those fit in the category of plants. Okay, those are labels for things, words that we use to communicate those concepts. But is it acceptable or unacceptable that I just threw my hair in a ponytail? Is it acceptable or unacceptable that I'm actually in sweats, but you can't tell because it's only the top half? Ha ha ha. Okay. Whatever. I mean, we could look at the question of acceptable and unacceptable as far as how the group figures that out, but that's not what's at issue. Okay? That's only for group adherence. If I'm slapping labels on things, those are easily provided to me by the group. So that could change, drop of a hat, overnight, right? What was acceptable yesterday is not acceptable today. What was unacceptable yesterday is now acceptable. Things change like that, not on the basis of thought, but on the basis of convention. So if I have rules under which to subsume particulars, I look at the particular event and say, ooh, it's one of those, therefore it's this. And I do that without thinking. I just slap the label on it. And that's not going to be judgment. Awesome. So we got that going on. All right. Hold fast. We've got that. Prescribed rules of conduct. Kind of like that. That's how other people think I should behave. Okay. And maybe those are good. And maybe they're not. I got to think about it and figure it out. Awesome. What does it mean to have a rule under which various particulars are subsumed? Sorry, I didn't change it when I still have it as a trigger word. I meant that to trigger thinking, to start or spark thinking. And so in other places, why I changed the word to spark. But subsume is one where you should immediately look at that, because particulars are particulars. Yeah, I'm wearing a sweater, but this is my sweater. It's this particular sweater. And if I want to think about, where I bought it and that I was with my cousin and blah, 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 I can think of all of that in memory and remember what I said when we were, oddly enough, picking out things to go wine tasting in. It's actually kind of a purple color, but not really showing up in the video. You've seen this sweater, whatever. Anyway, I can bring all of that up in the big farmer's market sack of memory when I'm just now reflecting on it here. And I chit-chatted through what that means and what it means to actually still be able to spend time with my cousin. I have a cousin who's, she's very sick. So that we got to have a chance to hang out and do something stupid like buy sweaters and go wine tasting. Okay? It's fun. And think about the importance of that, not just for her and me, but for me. Spending time with family is always very important. All right. So why is it that a thinker doesn't hold on to rules under which to subsume particulars, but instead has self-set limits? This is not a 100% honest question. Okay? So I want you to be crystal clear on this. It's totally fine for me to say, this is a coffee cup, this is a sweater, these are earrings. I need to be able to get through my day. Remember page 160 where she said cliches, stock phrases, standardized modes of conduct. These are great, okay? Because they're quick ways of handling things. The problem is if that's the only way I have of looking at the world. Keep that in mind. Awesome. Love it. Okay. Arendt gives another Socratic proposition at the top of page 179. That's the third Socratic proposition. Love, exciting and new. Question number 6 is about love by desiring what is not there. When I'm here with you and we're talking, when you're talking with your family or busy doing the work that you have to do to complete your classes, you are not talking to yourself. When you stop, when something stops you and pulls you out of the interpersonal into that relationship with yourself, it reminds you that this is something you value. You love this relationship. Okay, awesome. All right, one of the best quotes is from 180. And it also shows how she's pulling away from Socrates and Plato especially. But where she comes back to her own voice is when she says on 180, the sad truth of the matter is that most evil is done by people who never made up their minds to be either bad or good. They never made up their minds. They just glommed onto what everybody else was doing. And the process of making up your mind about something requires thinking and requires setting a limit and requires then carrying it out in action. The idea that I make up my own mind and that I'm not just having it made up for me through group conformity is what she's talking about here. And we see it with the guys throughout Machete season, but especially when Leopold is pointing out that he doesn't have any thoughts to call back up. He says this, it's 2:30 where he starts his statement. And he says, I can give you endless details about the killings, but when you ask me about my thoughts during those awkward moments, I got nothing. I don't know what to reply. And he gives some examples. If I was as a farmer going down, I'm thinking about this. As a teacher going off to school, you're thinking about this. But the killer going into the marshes, there's nothing. Okay? It's just through group conformity. And I think often, being a farmer, um, maybe you are doing the same thing every day and you're just kind of going along. And as a teacher, sometimes it's doing the same thing every day too. So I can do that without thinking. But what he's pointing out is that specifically during this time, he didn't have that inner dialogue. It's almost as though he was hiding from himself. Please keep in mind, Leopold is the only guy out of the guys in Machete Season who really acknowledges that what he did was wrong and that it it causes a problem in being able to live well with himself. He is not at peace. Okay? Many of our thoughts were empty. They left no memories behind. Well, just think about that. If I never made up my mind, I never had that conversation with myself. I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. There you go. All right. Awesome. All right. The two Socratic propositions, we've seen those before, and we went through. That's all of question number 9. I like the idea that these are byproducts. I can't sit down and say, I want to prove to myself that the Socratic propositions are true. I want to make them true and operative in my life. If I'm a thinker, they're self-evident and they already are. If I'm not a thinker, then there's no way I can convince myself because I wouldn't sit down. I would sit down with a friend and start talking it out and say, well, what do you think this means? Well, what would that mean, in society or for like all of us or something? Okay, and I'd go in another direction because I'm talking with another person, not talking with myself. All right, awesome. I love that she points out that the Socratic propositions are subjective statements. They're not objective truth, they're subjective truth. For a thinker, they are automatically self-evidently so. For a non-thinker, no amount of work could make them true. All right. Question H, 9H. According to page 185, why is it better to suffer harm than do wrong? I like that one because I can remain the friend of the one who suffers, but no one is going to want to be the friend of a thief, a murderer, or a liar. All right? 180, that idea of remaining my friend. I want to have this conversation. We saw this all the way back in our very first pages of reading from some questions of moral philosophy. If I want to be able to carry on this dialogue with myself, I have to make sure that the two partners are friends, that they get along, okay? That the relationship is in a good working order, okay? Nice. I'm only going to mention this briefly. Caca daimonasteros. Caca, I'm not kidding, is the Greek preface. It means evil. Yes, evil is caca. Okay, we have the word cacophony, bad sounding. If you hit 5 piano keys all in a row, is what it's going to sound like. That's cacophonous. Daimon is, in effect, conscience. Okay, so caca daimonasteros is being in possession of a bad conscience. Okay, if you're wondering why the word daimon in Greek sounds like the English word demon, it's because that's where we get the word demon from. Socrates, in the statement of defense that he provides in the Apology, is the first to use that word. He was talking about a divine voice that he hears in his head when he's about to do something wrong or stupid. And he says he calls it divine because the darn thing is never wrong. It's infallible. It always speaks up when he's about to do something wrong or stupid. And he says that this divine voice, this daimon. Well, what would we call the little voice in our head that speaks up when we're about to do something dumb or stupid or wrong? It's our conscience, okay? So, or it would be my conscience because we can't share one. But that's exactly what's going on. It's the first mention in Western literature concerning conscience. So kaka daimon is having a bad conscience. That's only going to be an issue for me if I'm a thinker. If I don't have the relationship with my inner self, then I'm not worried about whether or not that relationship is going well. All right. Look at Fulgence on that one, especially. Why do they want us to talk about it now? Why it wasn't talked about in front of us? What else can we say? Blah, blah, blah. All this. That becomes really poignant when you consider the fact that he's a deacon. If you refer back to the chapter and God in all of this, I think it's page 144. I don't want to look it up right now. Either way, it's Fulgence talks about the fact that he was a deacon. He conducted services in the village when the priest was absent. That's how, advanced he was in the church. And here he is not understanding the very nature of repentance. I mean, not to wax theological, but again, pensare, think. To repent is to think again. You cannot be forgiven unless you think again, which requires that you think in the first place, which obviously is why they were asking the men to talk, so that they would start that internal dialogue again. Teshuvah. Shuv is to turn. Teshuv is to turn, return. Teshuvah is the act of turning back to return to what you thought about before. There you go. I can't be forgiven if I'm not a thinker. Remember what she says on 95. It is the person and not the crime that is forgiven. If I'm not a person because I'm not thinking about it, then all I am is what I do, because all I am is what other people see. And there's no inner life that gives my life meaning. Awesome. Okay, the definition of thinking from page 184 is nice, quick, super brief. There's a bunch of these. It's basically just, I'm not going to look it up. It's just basically the soundless, solitary dialogue we call thinking. And those words are enough to give the definition of thinking. I would strongly encourage you in the Arendt paper to whatever quote you're using, keep in mind that soundless dialogue is enough to spark the activity of thinking. Then do the thinking. How can I have a soundless dialogue? Dialogue is literally the action of talking out loud. Okay? And it's soundless because it's internal. Dialogue, though, should also trigger thinking. Dialogue, die is the prefix meaning to. Okay? Sorry, it just made me think about diagram. That doesn't make so much sense. Anyway, but DIA means two. Okay, so there's two taking place, but I'm only one, and it's soundless because it's internal, but it's because I'm talking with my inner self, my inner me, my conscience, whatever it is that you want to say. So that takes place in actual words, and those words are very important because words are what convey meaning in human life. And words, I always think of the line from the In Excess song, Devil Inside. Words are weapons sharper than knives. I mean, just as great and as much meaning as words can convey, they can also cut to the quick and really hurt. And sometimes those are the words I'm using in the dialogue with myself. And now I can suddenly realize that there's a lot of emotion in what I'm saying, or a lot of other feelings that are coming up and whatnot. Those aren't to be ignored. They're not to be wallowed in either, but I need to look at what those are. Where are they coming from? And that asks further questions. See, all of that in my conversation with myself goes into that farmer's market bag of memory that can expand as big as it needs to be. And all the other times when I think about this, things like that, I find myself bringing all that back up and making expectations for the future, doing this, that, and the other. So overall, then I get to remember, with whom am I speaking? Me. There's a relationship with myself that I want to have continue because it is so important. I need to be able to think so that I can set limits for myself, so I can judge what I will and will not do, so that I can live in peace with myself. If I can't or don't or shut off or handle it badly, that relationship with myself, like any other relationship, it just isn't going to endure. So no matter what, last thing I'll say in this portion of the video is when you pull out if you pull out a quote to define thinking, what that activity is, go into it, do the work. Let the specific words spark the dialogue with yourself and talk about that dialogue, the words, the emotions, all going into memory. And then also bringing up the relationship with self. If you go into those three things, you've really nailed it with thinking, and you also have the advantage that you set up going into page 101 on self-set limits. All right, more in a minute.